Welcome to our third day in week 4. As you continue preparing for assignment 3 and working on your research proposal, one of the important parts in preparing your research for your research project term paper is to master the art of citations. So with citations, we are giving credit or recognition to the author. So anybody that has written something that is outside of the paper, so outside information, who gave you side information or ideas. And your research proposal will be you reading all these papers and finding information that you will use for your research and your term paper. So this skill is very important for your research proposal and eventually your term paper. Now, you've already practiced some of this, and some of you are showing good use of this skill in your assignment 1 and in your assignment 2. So that's your summary and your short opinion essay. So now we're going to apply this to big term papers in every course that you're going to do after this that needs essay writing. So whether it's argumentative essay or research essay, you are going to be citing outside information. Referencing the source is anything that is not from you. When you write summaries and paraphrases and quotes. So we're going to look at these paraphrasing and quoting in this lecture and show you how you can do it. So there are two main types of citations that you give. Although we did talk about the third one, summarizing. So if you remember, direct quotes are the author's idea and they are written in the author's words. Next, paraphrasing and summarizing. These are the author's ideas, but in your words. Still, the important thing to remember is that you are citing the author's idea. And these are not your ideas or information. So these include things like papers, books, magazines, newspapers, videos, lectures, anything really. So again, ideas and information, and we cite these. And the two ways we cite them, or 3, is 1, a direct quote, author's idea in their words. 2, we paraphrase, that's the author's idea in your words. And summarizing is also the author's idea in your words. Again, we focus on citing the author's idea. First, let's start with quoting. we ask 3 questions: what, how, and why. And the answer to what is quoting is that we are using the exact words of a source. Again, the author's words to his or her, or even their, if you have multiple author, idea. And why do we use this? Well, in this lecture we give 2 reasons. One, precise language is important, where every word matters. It matters in your argument. You can explain every word, you can use every word as the detail, so all your details matter. So an example of this, maybe, let's say if you're in court and you are trying to use what somebody said as evidence, like a statement. Or maybe a powerful saying. Or a strong claim that you agree or disagree with. Or a factual statement. These can be rules and principles. If you study physics, Newton's laws could be important, which also leads to the last one that I will say to you today, definitions for terms, key terms, and concepts. So these are useful for your general knowledge. Factual statements, rules and principles, you would need these for your general knowledge in your research. So quotes are useful to help you understand precisely what the original idea is, and that every word matters and you get all the detail. Which leads to the second point. The author uses original, powerful, and interesting language that if you paraphrase it, it might get lost. What this means is there's specific meaning in that quote. We'll show you in some examples in that quote, singular. That cannot be, let's say, translated or paraphrased. So, we'll use translation as an example. All of you are in this class are Chinese speaking, and so you may know words like this, and I'll write it in simplified. Well, this means China, but each of these characters have a specific meaning. Maybe, Middle Kingdom, if I were to translate more literally. But if I just paraphrase it as China, I would lose some of the meaning. But if you want to keep the meaning, keep all of the meaning in your interpretation, then you quote. So again, 2 reasons why you would quote. 1, you want to use the exact terms, the precise language in what the author's idea is. So you use the author's words, so you be precise. And 2, you want to keep the language that is being used by the author, whether it's powerful or interesting or meaningful, that will be lost if you try to translate or paraphrase it. So let's call it meaningful. Concise and meaningful. So you quote instead. So let's take a look at what a quote would look like. Here are some examples on how to quote. And this will show you not only what the quotes would look like, but why we use quotes on certain occasions. Remember, we want to be precise and we want to use it for meaningful things that the author's saying. Precise and meaningful authors' words that represent their ideas as closely as you can. And the closest way you can do that is to quote them. So, 3 methods. 1 is to introduce the quotation and then quote. 2 is to integrate the quote into your sentence. And 3 is to introduce the quote with a full sentence and usually a colon. So the first one reads like this. So we have 3 authors, Cochrane, Stamper, and Cochrane. These are actually 3 people. And they suggest in 2016, so we have these authors suggesting something. And their idea is this, that your reader should always be able to understand why the quotation is important to your argument. Now, you may try to paraphrase this and say, okay, readers should understand why you quote something. Okay, so I just gave it a quick try in paraphrasing this. So I had reader should understand. I got why. I got quotation or quote. Why you quote something. Sure, but I may miss something here, that why your quote is important to your argument. I'm implying that, but I didn't have it in writing. And if I wanted to agree or disagree with this group of authors' argument, I best start with a quote. So you use quotes for something that you would examine. And interpretation. Something that you would examine and interpret in your paragraph. And you introduce that by saying the authors. I'll clean this up a little bit. So these are the authors. So here's your X. And these are some words you could use: notes, argue, suggest, states, maintains. Now remember to use subject-verb agreement for this one. If you got groups of authors, you use the plural form of these verbs. If you got one author, use the singular form. Usually they have an S after the verb. Here you got 3 authors and they suggest, okay, and then you add the quote. Make sure you put quotation marks for quotes, very important. And in APA, you include the page number. And here you have the authors. So again, when you quote, you always have the who that's the author, and plus the year, that's here, 2016, plus the page. So anyone who wants to find your quote in the article can with the right page number. And that's how you introduce a quote. The first method is somebody, X, notes, argue, suggests, states, maintains something, and then you add the quote. Okay, so that's your first one. The second method is to integrate, put your quote as part of your sentence. And it might read something like this. We're using a different quote. When working on a piece of academic writing, so there's your sentence, well, part of it. Remember, this is not a complete sentence. You've got your subordinating conjunction when working on a piece of academic writing. Well, we should do something. Well, these three authors, Cochrane, Stamper, and Cochrane again, in the same article, 2016, that's written in that year, on a different page, to page 75, they said something else. They said, always clarify the expectations for documentation with your instructor. And then there's more, in order to avoid plagiarism. Again, since the quote is a specific instruction, and instructions are important, we should follow these. Quotes are useful for instructions. We have to do everything that the instruction says. So every word matters because we want to do everything that the person is telling us. So here is always clarify the expectations for documentation with, specifically with your instructor. If you are able to paraphrase the whole thing and keep all the key words, yes, try it. But when you quote, it's very useful because you keep every word that the person says. And with method 2, this quote is placed in a context of your sentence. You're saying, well, when should you clarify? Oh, well, always. And always clarify when? Well, when working on a piece of academic writing. So when you're writing a paper, do this. Always clarify the expectations for documentation with your instructor. And why? Well, in order to avoid plagiarism. When you put a quote in your sentence, notice that you have the big brackets here. So this would read, you have a sentence, the whole sentence with the quote. The author is not mentioned in the sentence, but it's outside. So we got the who, the author, we got the when, the year, and then the where, the page, and it's all in the bracket. So if I were to clean this up a little bit, this is the section. With method 2, when you integrate the quote in your sentence and the author's name is not in the sentence, put the author's name, the who, in the brackets along with everything else, the year and the page number. Okay, last one. Method 3 is similar to method 2. The only difference here is that you start with a complete sentence. Method 2, your quote is part of your sentence. Here, the quote is an extra sentence. And they are joined grammatically with a colon. So it says, most professors understand that students don't mean to plagiarize. Okay, then what? So the quote explains, many students who are already familiar with using direct quotations who are already familiar with using direct quotations. But when it comes to paraphrasing and summarizing, that's when I see a lot of accidental plagiarism. Okay, again, the same group of people. You got your who, you got your when, that's the year, and then the where. So that would be the authors, the year, and then the page number. So this is for methods 2 and 3. With method 1, you have the who, and then the when, and then your quote, or suggest. Let's put simple one, says, and then your quote, and then after that at the end you have your page number, the where. Okay, so this one is from method 1. Most of the time, these are placed after your quotes. Again, you start with a full sentence, put a colon after your sentence. Usually it's like the first part to explain the quote or give a contrast. Here, notice it's saying, oh, most professors understand students don't mean to plagiarize. Actually, you might have to cite this one too. But here they're citing the quote as a contrast to, or an elaboration of saying most professors understand that students don't mean to plagiarize. It could be part of this one. They may have said something similar, that most professors understand that students don't mean to plagiarize. You probably don't, and I don't. But when it comes to paraphrasing and summarizing, as they say in the quote, we can accidentally plagiarize. But again, you would have sentence 1. I'll put sentence A, colon, and then your quote, that's sentence B, and then you cite it here, like this. So again, 3 methods. 1, use X, or author says, use some word to say says, and then add the quote. Method 2, put the quote as part of your sentence. Method 3, write a sentence, add a colon, and then write your quote as well. With method 1, since you are introducing the quotation, you would have the author and the year, use the word says, and then add the quote, and then finish by citing where. Methods 2 and 3, since the quote is part of the sentence or an extra sentence, you would cite everything at the end with the author, the year, and the page number. And that's it for quoting. How about paraphrasing? With paraphrasing, remember, it is still the author's idea, but you write it in your words. And you are doing this to make your ideas clear in your arguments. And here are some extra reasons why we want to make ideas clear. For example, you were reading a journal article. And if you remember from last week's lecture about research, sometimes you read journal articles that's written for other researchers. So they use technical language. And you can find these in, say, scientific documents. And you want to change that language maybe into everyday language. So then the reader, let's say you and me, who is not familiar with whatever subject, would understand. Another reason would be, okay, well, the idea is more important than the original wording. Now, these are not claims that we talked about earlier, or principles or rules, but it might be something like the details of the study. In this case, the results. So you want to move from the details to, let's say, the main idea, or in this case, let's say results, for example. So instead of saying maybe 978 people out of 1,000 agree to something, you might say, well, 9 out of 10, or most people agree. Again, you want the main idea. And you would find this when you read scientific documents with research results. As long as you understand what they're trying to say, you can summarize and paraphrase the details into the main idea. And the last one, sometimes, especially with scientific documents and you're trying to argue using those facts, the author's language isn't as clear as you'd like. So maybe you need to translate the author's language to build or emphasize a point. Again, you want to capture the main idea. And this is where, instead of using a quote where every word matters, sometimes authors say too much. So you want to use the right words. In this case, it's like, let's say when there are too many. Or I should say, when the author sometimes uses too many, for example, or when the author isn't clear. So you would paraphrase to capture the main idea and get the right words. Alright, so how would you do this? Well, 3 things. 1, you want to restate again the main ideas in your own words. Second, not only do you want to use your own words, you want to use your own sentence structure. Remember, when you paraphrase, you're not just using synonyms. Paraphrase is, you have synonyms and your sentence structure. Very important. So then it becomes your words, or in this case, your paraphrase. And I'll show you what that means. Finally, well, back to your first reason. Well, you're using a citation. Again, you're citing a source. And that's why we paraphrase. Summarizing, just to talk about this briefly, is to condense the information. This is similar to getting the research results. So whether you are paraphrasing or summarizing, you are working with the author's idea and you're rewriting it in your words. So let's see what that looks like. This is slightly more complicated because you have to change the author's words into your own. So let's start with a quote. So, see in this quotation, if you can figure out what type of method they're using. Let's have a moment to read over it, and I'll read it with you. An oft-noted biblical allusion in Huckleberry Finn, that's a storybook, is that comparing Huck to the prophet Moses. Like Moses, whom Huck learns about from widow Douglas, Huck sets out, an orphan on his raft, down the river. In the biblical story, it is Moses' mother who puts him in his little raft, hoping he will be found. In the novel, Huck, or Moses, takes charge of his own travels. This is from William Thierfelder, 2015, page 194. Now, I'm reading this quote for a reason. What we'll be doing next is going to try different paraphrases. Some are good. Some are, let's say, not good. Too much like a quote. So this is your sentence. Still the author's idea, though. It's always the author's idea. That's why we cite this. But when the paraphrase is not good, it's still too much. It still looks like the author's words, which means you should just quote in the first place. But here, you notice that everything is written in brackets. So you got the author, you got the year, and you got the page number. So this would be method 3. Method 2 or 3. And in this case, well, this is quoted, a little raft, so it's part of a sentence. It's method 2. Again, method 2 or 3, you have everything in the brackets. Now keep this quote in mind as we move to the next slide and look at paraphrases. But first, we use a direct quotation. Here, we have the original quote. We're going to use this whole thing. So we are quoting from this, or paraphrasing, as we'll try later, from this passage. So see if you can find, as I move to the next slide again, which part of this is the person quoting from. Here, we read it again. This one is somebody using direct quotation. We'll go back to the slides here. Okay, so everything in purple that you see here is supposed to be a quote. So first we have sets out, comma, an orphan on his raft down the river. And then the next part, in the biblical story, it is Moses' mother who puts him in his little raft. In the novel, Huck Moses takes charge of his own travels. So let's check the first part. Sets out, an orphan on his raft down the river. Do we see that here? Yep, we see it. Sets out, an orphan on his raft down the river. So this is the first quote that the person is using. And then the next quote you can see the whole second sentence is used as quote 2. Again, it's a method 2. Because these quotes are part of a big sentence. So you got this big sentence here, and it's talking about how This book by Mark Twain has allusions to the Bible, similarities with the Bible, using Huck, a character, as an example, and they compare similar to Moses, and it's similar in the way, oh, well, if you know the story of Moses, well, when he was a baby, he was put in a raft down the Nile River, and they compare, and in the second quote, you see that, okay, the difference between them, while they're similar, is that Moses' mother was the one who put Moses in the raft, but in the story of Huckleberry Finn, Huck is not, there's no mother to put him in the raft. He was in charge of his own travels. By using quite direct quotation, this person who wrote this wanted to keep the author's words. They seem important to that person, to capture the author's idea. So when I'm reading your papers and when you're writing your papers, quotes always have these quotation marks. When you use them, you and I and anyone who reads the paper would know right away that it is the author's words about the author's idea. If you do not use quotations, so a quote with no quotation means, I'll tell you first, plagiarism. Another word for this, for now, I'd say it's cheating. Because instead of saying these are the author's words and the author's idea, no quote, it would look like your idea. Just a side note here. You use the quotation marks to say, yes, these are the author's words, and these are the author's idea. And it actually makes your argument stronger. Because you are trying to prove something. This person is trying to prove the similarities between Huckleberry Finn and the Bible, for whatever reason, and he's using the book to do it. So when you cite, you are making your argument stronger, and quoting is one of the ways you can do that. So let's try something a little harder, paraphrasing. And remember, we have reasons to paraphrase. Maybe you want to present the argument your way, but you still need the author's ideas from the source. Let's take a look at this one. So, appropriate, this is a good paraphrase. So a good paraphrase has your words, remember, and your sentence structure. But you're always citing the author's idea. So let's take a look at how this works. Now this one, it's like a method 1 because the author's there. And that's the year here. So we got the author and the year. Okay. Now notice all of this, none of it is in quotation marks. That's fine. But none of this is in the author's words either. It is in your words. So just to clarify, you can use your words with no quotation marks. That's okay. That's okay. That's fine. As long as you cite. Cite the idea when it's not yours, or the information. Here, by putting in the author's name and the year, and even where they find it, you are paraphrasing. Don't forget that. You still need to cite. So you need your words, you need your sentence structure, but you always need the citation. Let's read what this is like, why this is a good one. The author notes that numerous readers have linked the character of Huckleberry Finn and the biblical figure of Moses. They are both orphans who take a water journey, the author argues. So, 2 sentences so far. If you compare this sentence with the previous slide, with a quote, you'd find that the words are different. They're your words. The sentence structure is different. It's your sentence structure. And the last sentence has the same thing. Author's idea, because it's from the book, but different sentence structure. Moses' journey begins because of the actions of his mother, while Huck's journey is undertaken by himself. So compare this. Go back to the previous slide and see. So instead of saying, sets out an action on his raft down the river, here we read, they are both orphans who take a water journey. Different words, different structure. And then we read also, in the biblical story, it is Moses' mother who puts him in his little raft. In the novel, Huck Moses takes charge of his own travels. Notice the paraphrase, Moses' journey begins because of the actions of his mother, while Huck's journey is undertaken by himself. So again, different words, so this is paraphrasing. Different sentences, but with the same idea, and that's the author's idea. Different words and different sentences, those are your words and your idea. And that's a good paraphrase. Now, this is difficult because you need for good paraphrasing, you will need a strong background knowledge of synonyms, and you would need skill in changing sentence structure to do this. The more skillful you are, and the more words you know, the better your paraphrases will be. They will be your words and your sentences. So the areas you want to improve on in your whole academic career is going to be your vocabulary and your grammar. So remember, in academic writing, checking grammar is the last thing you want to do, but you can use your vocabulary and your grammar to do this, paraphrasing or summarizing. And these skills are very useful for research and for arguments. Both are important skills for any student in any field at university. So if you want to get into university, we are teaching you one of the most important skills you are going to ever use in your entire school life. And you're going to need vocab and grammar to do it, to paraphrase. And so the citation part, I'm teaching you as an extra skill. That will help you not plagiarize and tell other people where you got your information from. Let's go look at some paraphrases that are not so good. So what this means is that the words are too close. or too similar. Not just the words, your sentence structure and your words are too close and too similar. Which means it reads more like a quote than a paraphrase. Now let's take a look at this. Here we have the original quote again. I don't need to read it now. But this is nice. We get to see it side by side. Take a look. So, we have the first part. Yes, we used a different method. That's good. This part's good. So, we went from method free to method 1. That's good. Okay, change the method. Now, this part is actually fine. The second part, that's not underlined. Huck, an orphan like Moses, travels down the river on a raft. So this is Huck sets out an orphan on his raft down the river. This paraphrase is okay. Again, you still have similar words, river and raft, but at least the sentence structure is different. But look at this phrase. Huckleberry is often compared to the prophet Moses. And I'll box the phrase that is a problem. This one is not okay. Sure, you change the words, but you have the same sentence structure. And the words are too similar too. So you have Huckleberry Finn, Huckleberry, that's the same, is, well, yeah, is that comparing? Well, here is just is often compared. Too similar to the prophet Moses. To the prophet Moses. That's the same. So here's a general rule for you to remember. If you have anywhere from 4 to 5 words that are the same as the original, then it's a quote. Okay? So this is why changing the words is not enough. You want to have a different sentence structure, so then the 4 to 5 words in a row, I should say, in a row are the same. When you have that, that's a quote. To the prophet Moses. To the prophet Moses. That's a quote. That's like a quote right there. So if you use a different sentence structure, like this one, readers have linked the character. Biblical figure. So there's no prophet here, and instead of saying Finn is compared to Moses, here the paraphrase is saying, oh, these two characters, Finn and Moses, are linked. So again, different words, different sentence structure. So again, that's good paraphrasing. You're not getting 4 to 5 words in a row. Words that are the same. So none of that. All right. So that's it for today's lecture on quotes and paraphrasing for your homework, let's get you to do one of these things here. So instead of rewriting your paragraph, you work on your research. So for your assignment free, I spelled assignment wrong. Work on your assignment free. Remember, you have 2 summaries that you need to do. Use quoting and paraphrasing in those summaries. So I'll be looking for them, and it's good practice for you. In your research proposal. So that's your homework. It's going to help you finish your assignment faster and divide your work. So I've made that change instead. Use citations, and don't worry about this part. Just work on assignment free. And don't worry about getting a printed copy. We're taking an online course. Just work on your assignment free. And specifically for homework, do your summaries after finding your sources. After finding and reading your academic sources. Okay, and for practice, in your course pack, read pages 32 to 37 and review your grammar. Okay, and this is going to be extra practice on Canvas. So remember, we have a grammar quiz again. This is grammar quiz 2. So we'll cover things from week 2 and 3. So all the grammar stuff about sentence structure and parallel structure. We'll test you on that. And these are tests that will be helping to build your skills in your essay writing. So the quiz is on Friday before midnight. And your assignment free, that's due on Monday next week, also before midnight. Okay, that's it, guys. If you have any questions, again, you can post on Canvas in week 4's discussion. Most of you have proposed something on discussion week 3. That's great. So post on week 4 if you have any questions or comments about your research topic. Or email me directly. And yep, we'll see you next time. It's a long day today, so do your best. Work on those sources, practice your paraphrasing and summarizing.